The Travels and Adventures of Little Baron Trump and His Wonderful Dog Bulger, Chapter 7, Part 3. To my great disappointment, the three captives died after a few days' imprisonment, not, however, until they had laid a number of eggs, about the size of robin's eggs, which I packed away most carefully in my boxes of specimens. I may say right here that upon my return home, I subjected these eggs to a gentle warmth and was charmed to see emerge from each of them a larva about the size of a pipe stem. But to my delight, and to Bulger's absolute terror, these pipe stem affairs had, inside 24 hours, become as large and round as Frankfurt sausage. In due time, they passed into the chrysalis state, but this apparent death seemed to become a real one. Weeks went by, and there was no sign of a metamorphosis. I was cruelly disappointed. More important matters, however, arose to occupy my thoughts. The sleeping fireflies of the Orient were quite forgotten when one evening the women servants of the manor house, with blanched faces and piercing shrieks, came literally tumbling headlong down the main stairway. Fortunately, I was sitting on the first terrace of the park. With a bound, I gained the hallway, and snatching down a brace of firearms from the wall, threw myself in front of the wildly shrieking troop of women, calling out in stentorian tones for silence. "Has murder been committed?" I cried. "Is there revolt among the tenantry? Has blood been shed?" "No, no, little baron," they exclaimed, with wild eyes and clasped hands. "But the castle is on fire. Your rooms are in flames. Your treasures will be consumed. Quick, little baron, save them, save us, save the gracious lady and venerable master." Quicker than it takes to tell it, I laid hold of the rope of the alarm bell and set it pealing. The retainers answered with a will. A score of them burst into the hallway, ready for the word of command. "Seize the fire buckets, my lads," I called out calmly, but in a tone of sufficient dignity to inspire perfect confidence. "Man ladders to the windows of my apartments." By this time, another gang of the tenantry came rushing in upon the scene. I met them with an order to unhang the portraits in the baronial dining hall and store them in a place of safety. Then, having spoken a few words of comfort to the gracious Baroness, my mother, I seized a fire bucket and led the line up the stairway. Laying my shoulder against the door of my apartments, I burst it open, and with head lowered before the blaze of light, dashed in, followed by the bucket bearers. "Halt!" I cried. It was too late. Some of the finest hangings and rugs were spoiled by half a dozen buckets of water emptied upon them. The mystery was solved. The blaze of light that fairly flooded my apartment proceeded from the huge fireflies which had hatched out without being noticed by me. But I didn't begrudge my ruined hangings. There was my recompense clinging to the walls. I need hardly say it, that the giant fireflies were the wonder of their day, and brief as it was, it sufficed to cover my name with glory as resplendent as their mysterious fire. I caused a huge lamp of exquisite oriental pattern to be constructed, and having placed the light bearers beneath its dome of polished glass, passed several nights in the most perfect happiness, seated in its soft white light, poring over musty volumes of travel, written in tongues long forgotten, save but a few of the most learned scholars. But my delight was short-lived. The gigantic fireflies absolutely refused to eat anything, although I tempted them with hundreds of different kinds of food. Little by little, their mysterious flame lost its bright effulgence, burning lower and lower, until it went out in death. To resume the thread of my story, I was growing impatient to reach the tablelands of the Himalayas and tax the powers of endurance of my guides to their utmost. In our bivouacs at times, he would encircle my slender ankle joints with his thumb and index finger and exclaim, "All the gods help make thee, little baron. meaning that there dwelt great willpower and strength in my small body. The skies now cleared up. The living pall rolled back toward the horizon, and naught remained to tell of the mighty flood of light which so lately overran the heavens, save a faint shimmering streak of fire in far distant western sky. Soon it went out altogether. Thus far, our journey had been through an open country, with here and there a clump of forest trees, which at last grew so frequent that I felt sure we must be approaching the confines of some extensive piece of woodland. In this I was not mistaken. As we reached the summit of a range of hills, I could see in the distance a long, dark line of forests. My guide, who had pushed on ahead in search of water, came galloping wildly back. I paid no particular attention to him until I noticed that he had dismounted in great haste and was running toward me. Turn back, little master, he exclaimed, throwing himself at my feet and clasping my legs with his arms. Enter not in the Palin Ma Talin, home of darkness. 100 pilgrims have laid their bones in the moss-grown depths of the great gloomy forest. It is as pathless as the ocean. It is as silent as death. It is as limitless as the heavens. Nor man nor beast can breathe its cool, moist air and live. Turn back, I beseech thee, little baron. Tempt not the Palin Ma Talin. Palin Metallan, Palin Metallan, I repeated as if awakening from a dream. Why, it must be, aye, there can be no doubt of it, the great Aryan forest, in which countless centuries ago the human race, having abandoned their holes in the clay banks, first learned to hunt the wild beast, feed on its flesh, and clothe themselves in its skins. In my joy at this discovery, I threw a handful of gold pieces into the lap of my astonished guide. Bulger, always ready to share my happiness, came bounding to my side, barking loud and shrill. To my infinite surprise, the answering bark of a dog came floating on the morning breeze. Hark! I exclaimed in a whisper. This time it was unmistakable. "'Tis one of Beni Aga's dogs," was my guide's reply. "Come, little master, let me lead thee to his cave. It is beneath the very shadow of the great gloomy forest. He can tell thee of its dangers, for he hath crossed it." "And come safely back?" I asked. "While life lasts, he will sit in the gloom of Palin Matalin," murmured the man. "What meanest thou?" I cried. "I mean that the noonday sun cannot cast the shadows from his eyes." "He is blind?" "Aye, little master, blind," was the guide's reply. "And yet, save this blind hermit, there lives no human creature who can lead thee safely through the great gloomy forest." "Have done with thy jesting," I cried. "Nay, little master," was the man's answer. "I speak in all truth and reverence, for Beni Aga is a holy man, and in him dwells such a radiant spirit that his path is illumined and his footsteps are sure when other men would walk to their destruction." "Oh, lead me to him!" I exclaimed with ill-concealed joy. "1,000 pieces of gold are thine if the blind hermit consents to be my guide." "1,000 pieces of gold?" repeated the guide, with a gleam in his dark eyes. "Oh, little baron, no one can earn that princely reward excepting thee thyself. Who am I, poor, miserable, ignorant slave that I am, that I should attempt to move this saintly and learned man on thy behalf? He would heed the cry of one of his dogs far more quickly than he would my charter." "Is he so unlike his kind," I asked as we rode slowly along, "as not to love gold?" "Aye, little baron, if every dried leaf in his forest were a coin of burnished gold, he would not stoop to pick one up." "Are his ears closed to flattery?" "As closed as his eyes are to the sun's rays." "Loves he not some savory dish?" "Fruits and berries content him." "Surely a draught of rare old wine, mellow with age, fragrant as crushed roses, purple within the beaker, would warm his heart to a quicker beating and incline him to serve me?" Nay, nay, little baron, a gourd full of water from the sparkling rill near his home in the rocks is sweeter to him than any nectar ever distilled by the hands of man. They say he is learned. Then shall my gift be a score of rare old books, priceless parchments filled with thoughts so noble, so deep, so subtle, that to read them therein means to live 1,000 years in one? Ah, little master, replied my guide with a mournful smile, thou art still astray. This dweller mid the rocks, this lover of solitude, the measure of whose life, they say, is full 300 years, knows no other books than the pages of his own soul. On these he has turned his thoughts so long and so diligently that the foolish outpourings of so-called authors seem like the merest prattle of childhood. But look, little master, we are drawing near the home of the blind hermit. I turn my eyes in the direction indicated. A rocky ledge, wild, craggy, broken, seamed, and twisted, crowned with a growth of pine trees having knotted, gnarled, and fantastically shaped trunks and boughs, shut in our view. As we drew near the entrance to Beni Aga's cave, a troop of dogs of various ages and species came bounding forward with loud barkings. Bulger advanced to meet them boldly, after first glancing at my face to see whether I objected or not. It was a long while since he had met any of the members of his race, and then again he doubtless wished to get a good look at these residents of such a distant land. The feeling seemed to be mutual, for in an instant the barking ceased, and the hermit's dogs gathered about Bulger in silent wonderment. After a series of salutations, which plainly ended in the best of fellowships, the hermit's dogs endeavored to lure Bulger away for a run in the forest and fields. But in this they were, I need scarcely say, entirely unsuccessful. Bulger gave them to understand in very decided terms that he would talk with them, he would even romp with them, but that it must all be done under the eyes of his master. We now halted and dismounted. "This is the place," said my guide in low tones. "Through that deep fissure in the rocks thou wilt find a path that leads to Beni Aga's cave. Enter it boldly, little master. At the entrance to the cave thou wilt find a dried gourd hanging on the rocky wall. Seize it. When shaken, its seeds will give forth a loud rattling sound. This done, move not, though the shadows of evening find thee still standing at the door of Beni Aga's cave. Farewell, little master. Heaven make good to thee tenfold thy kindness to me. I will await thee 3 days. If by that time I do not hear thy voice calling me to serve thee again, I shall return to my kindred." Advancing to the cleft in the rocky wall, I found the gourd hanging by a leather thong. And we'll pause here and we'll continue with this story in the next video. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you guys. Thanks for watching. I love you. As Tigger says, ta-ta for now.